Jesus, in his Epiphany address, said this: "If we want to find Jesus, we have to overcome our fear of taking risks, our self-satisfaction, and our indolent refusal to ask anything more of life. We need to take risks simply to meet a child. Those risks are immensely worth the effort, since in finding that child, we find his tenderness and love." Will you pray with me? God of all, thank you for inspiration and questions and all those messy things in life that bring us to a place of resting in you. Amen. So I have about 5 questions here, which is something I think we can handle in 20 minutes. And they're tough questions. This is what I always find. It's never things like, why do you have the baptismal font to your right? It's never something like that. It's always deep questions. So the first one I'll answer is, how does religion and rationality jive given events in the real world? I think this is an important question for Christians to ask themselves, people of faith, all the time, because too often we say, well, that's faith, you just have to believe, and rationality and thinking and science, they're separated from each other, and they never meet. I'm reminded of when I was a kid and I was in a science class and we were learning about DNA, right? So that's the DNA and the RNA, that's where all our genes are. And she was from a conservative tradition, as I was, but I remember her saying to me, I don't believe in DNA because God made everything. And it just struck me at that point, well, that's an interesting way to go through life. I had another conversation with someone who believed that the dinosaurs died because of the flood, Noah's flood. And I'm like, but there's actually no evidence that dinosaurs and humans were ever together, you know? And another conversation about 7-day creation and what is the 7 days, you know? And I said, well, they can't be 24-hour days because we didn't get a sun and moon till the 3rd or the 4th day, and that's what does the days. The answer was, well, I believe they were 24-hour days because God can do anything. So you get this kind of anti-intellectual Christianity, or of all traditions. It's not just Christianity, people of faith, because they're scared. They're afraid, if they believe in evolution, that somehow there's no God anymore. And they're afraid if they believe in DNA, you know, messed up genes, then God isn't perfect. And so instead of opening themselves to the wonder and mystery of what science and the world has for us, they close themselves down, saying, this is all I can handle. I can't think about those things. Well, it's interesting to note that it was a Jesuit priest who first postulated the Big Bang Theory. And I was watching the other night Colbert, and Neil deGrasse Tyson was on, who is an atheist, and he's an astrophysicist. But there were a whole bunch of, there's an observatory in the Vatican that was there long before we had telescopes, watching the stars. So here's my thing. Faith is something that can't be proven, and we know that. God cannot be proven, whether God is or God isn't. If we dwell too much in our mind, where everything has to be proven, or too much in our gut, where we don't believe anything that doesn't feel right, we're messed up. There is this integration of our minds where we take the evidence and we look at it and we think, well, that changes things a bit. And also this sense that God is around us. We feel and know that God is present, that there is something other. We can't define that. We can never say we're right about God or our faith or anything. We can live into what we know spiritually, and we can welcome what we know rationally and put those two things together. And sometimes, you know, when we figure out that the sun and the moon are required to make a 24-hour day, we can say, you know what, that 6-day creation story, maybe that's a myth. That doesn't mean it's not true in some way. It just means that we don't have to take everything in the Bible like it's science, because it was never meant to be science. It's a document of faith and of relationship between God and humanity. So we work these things out together. That's, to me, how rationality and faith exist. And if you think about the wonders of the world and what we're discovering through science, it just makes me think, isn't God amazing? That's how I live. Maybe there's others of you who feel there are other things, and please do let me know. I just wanted to say that during Lent, we're having a series called Modern Ethical Dilemmas. And this is a series where we're going to explore some of the questions where maybe science and faith kind of figuring out what to do. Some of the things we're going to talk about are assisted dying and artificial intelligence and things like that. It's going to happen on Sunday, and we'll have a Wednesday series too. So if you're one of those people who likes rationality and figuring out how it goes with faith, that's for you. The other thing I want to say on that is that Christianity has always adapted to culture. Always. It has never been, this is how it is, don't tell me anything else. Certain sects are, but it isn't. And so as we move into learning more about our universe, our faith adapts and is in conversation with it at all times. Okay, a second question. Reconcile the old ways with the new generation. How does God speak to youth through us? And I figure that might be a question here, right? Because, you just need to look around to know that many in our congregation are aging, right? And you come from a different time. There's this phrase that you've probably already heard that's out a lot called, I'm spiritual but not religious, right? Spiritual but not religious people, particularly in the youth, because they are very spiritual. Spiritual being that feeding that part of yourself that isn't rational, that kind of, the things like love and peace and joy and all those things that we experience in life. So if you want a spiritual life, you want to feed those things. You want to bring more peace and more joy, more love into your life. So spiritual but not religious. Someone said to me once, and I think I said this, that a lot of people who are older, they would consider themselves religious but not spiritual. So religious people, they do what they were told to do when they were young to follow a Christian life. They go to church, they might read their Bible. If you have been told that you need to go to church every Sunday, they'll go to church every Sunday. They want to do everything they need to do to follow the Christian path as they were told. And whether that makes you feel good or it adds any value to your life or you feel like your spirit has lifted up is sometimes besides the point, because that's how you follow the Christian life. So that's religious but not spiritual, and spiritual but not religious. We, in conversations we have on staff and with other ministers, understand that because the United Church is a flexible religion, a flexible expression of Christianity that doesn't have a lot of dogmas, that we're perfectly poised to meet that spiritual but not religious group, right? Because what's really important in feeding your spirit is community, is in being together, is in loving each other, is in supporting each other, is in encouraging each other, holding people's hands when they're going through stressful times in their lives, rejoicing with them when they have children or they have an accomplishment. This is what a community does. This is what lifts the spirit. And it doesn't matter how old you are. If you are able to do that, to embrace people, then it's a conversation that young people are willing to have. Now, it does help if we use what Martin Luther said, we have to use the vernacular of the people, which means the language that they speak. So if we want to bring our faith to a younger generation, we need to speak the language that they speak. When about 20 years ago, I took a course on what was called digital culture worship. And they explained the difference between the modernist or the literate culture and the digital culture. Literate culture reads books. They like ideas. and arguments, right? That's literate culture. And so church in that era is all about the idea and explaining the idea and arguing against ideas that don't agree. That's literate culture. And that culture is from the Age of Enlightenment to about when the baby boomers too, right? Then we get into what we call postmodernism, where truth is not absolute, it's relative. Everyone talks about, you hear this all the time, well, my truth is, right? People talk about that. And so the center of what can be known is moving around and shifting. So the way you speak to the digital culture, they're the ones who have been raised on television, they know the internet. Now, my daughter has 2 favorite apps on her phone. One is Snapchat, right? Snapchat, she takes a picture, puts a little tagline on it, sends it to her friends. They see it, they laugh, and it shuts down. They have Snapchat stories where in an evening, she'll take a whole bunch of pictures and it puts the story together. You send it to your friends so that they can see what you've been up to. And if all you're doing is eating at McDonald's, that is not a very exciting story, but yes, they do that too. Which I also learned, they call it dawns. McDonald's, dawns. So there you go, if you wanna. Anyway, they think in stories because that's how they were raised. Everything is a story. So I want to hear the story of your life. The stories of the gospel are good things. But it's not an idea, it's a story that illuminates a part of your life. So in digital culture, why we use media a lot in some ways, you shift how you explain the gospel from all the creeds to this is the story of Jesus, or this is the story of that. So that's an important aspect of how we speak to young people. Just a little advertisement. We got some money from the United Church to pilot a series called Churchish, which is a different kind of worship experience. Because the other thing is people want to experience things, they don't want it explained to them. So the whole idea of worship is I'm going to experience God in this space. And those churches services are going to happen once a month starting in February 4th. And they are an attempt to express our faith in a more contemporary way, which you are welcome to come. For sure, we want you to. We need you to some. That will happen in Sunday evenings. But it's a way to say, okay, how can we just strip this down and start again? Churchish. Next question. What can I say to people who say they don't need a church to lead a good life or be a good person? I would say, I agree with you. You don't need a church to lead a good life or to be a good person, but you need a community. You need people to hold you accountable. You need people to hold your hand. You need people to be with you in the ups and downs of life. We are, as people, collectives, not just individuals. And although we promote that in our culture, our dominant culture, that it's all about me, it's not. It's all about us. It's how we change the world. It's how we support each other and we care for each other. So I would say to them, you don't need to live a good life, but if you want to have a life that is rounded and can be lived inside with other people to share your joys and concerns, then a faith community is a place that can happen. It's not the only place, but it is a place. I struggle with being open about who I am and what I believe in a world that has become sensitive to personal expression. A perfect example of this for me is I was talking to people who run a United Church camp, and they were talking about their day and what they do, and I said, oh, do you have Bible stories or anything like that? And she said to me, no, we have a lot of outreach kids, which are kids who are not from the church, so we have to be very careful. So we have a Vespers, but it's optional. And I was thinking about my church camp when I was little, which was a more conservative thing. If they got rid of anything, it was the sports in the afternoon. I mean, we had Bible stories, we sang songs. Every night we had a service with an altar call. They hammered that faith down over my head and down my throat that entire week. And by the end, if you weren't on your knees asking Jesus to save you, you weren't listening. So it was What a different way. And I think in the United Church, sometimes we've done that. We don't want to offend anyone. And that's good, because we're good Canadians. We're nice Canadians. And we have a faith, but we don't want to talk about it because they have something else. I think that the space that we're moving into, particularly with young people, is they don't mind if you believe something or have something. They want to hear your story. So respect for people's stories is really important. So what I really, and you hear me talk about this all the time, diversity, diversity, diversity. Why is that? I don't want us to be all the same. We come from different places. We believe different things. We're inspired by different things. We have passions for different things. I don't want anyone to think they have to come in here and check that at the door because what's appropriate in this building has already been decided, right? I believe people come as who they are. They argue things out, they express their joys, their passions, and it's diversity. In our affirming statement, we say, we believe that humanity is a beautiful mosaic. So the important thing is not to get involved in a conversation where you're trying to convince someone what you believe, or you're trying to convince them that they're not right. But to say, yes, I'm a person of faith. This is my story. This is why. Let me hear yours. That's how we can be who we are with integrity in the world. This is the last one. It's an easy one. Is there an afterlife or heaven? It's actually something that I struggle with too. For Jesus and the early writers, that was an important thing. You know, Paul says, if in this life alone we have hope, how miserable we would be of all the creatures in the world. The idea that there is something after. When I went through my sort of rational stage, I'm like, we go in the ground and the worms eat us and that's it. Let's concentrate on our life of faith here together now. You know, that's what's important, because we can never know. But here's, as I've been in ministry, as I've aged, probably you have too, here's what I know, not intellectually, but with my soul. We are embraced by God from our first breath to our last, and we are carried by God into our next reality, whatever that is. I don't know if heaven is a place where you know, like we used to imagine, where you all have a house and you know, see the people from your life and you live together forever in peace and everything is perfect. I don't know. But whatever it is, our spirits, our souls, our reality is taken and embraced by God and carried into our next reality. That's what I know. Questions are so amazing. So I encourage you, as you struggle with your faith and as you carry on, that you open yourself to the question. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. God is good. Amen.